All right, welcome to the program. Today we are joined by Jen Frazier. Now, I'll take a pit stop here and tell you why she's here. So this is a special series that we're doing, talking with stakeholders who are teaching, who are leading public engagement training programs around the US. Okay, and we're talking to them and we're asking them all these hard questions about why they do what they do, how they do it, and what they're learning. So today, Jen Frazier is on the hot seat. Jen, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much, Fanuel, for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Now, Jen does many things. Okay,
Yes.
she's a course director of Biochemistry 210, Science Communication at UCSF. So she's an adjunct professor there. But not only that, she's also the senior director in the Science Communication Lab. Okay, and Jen, please tell us a little bit about your background. How are you here today? How did you get here today?
Okay. Well, again, thanks for having me. And yes, it's I will try not to take the whole time describing how I got here because been a journey, but I think that also has really informed the course. So it's useful to start there. So I did a doctorate in biochemistry in cell biology, but biochemistry is part of it. I did a doctorate at the University of California at San Francisco, but realized while I was in graduate school that one of the things I loved most about science was sharing it. I always wanted to teach or be a professor, loved writing. So for the last 25 years, since leaving graduate school, I've been working in, I think we can get into this. One might call it science communication, but really a lot of it was what is termed informal science learning. So working in museums. And now I work at a small nonprofit, the Science Communication Lab, that does science documentary film and media. And I work with them not only on films, but really how to bring films into museum contexts and create public installations. So that's what I do as sort of my main, day job. But I'm really passionate about teaching and I love the course that I teach at UCSF. So I'm sure it's been very much informed by my experience as a practitioner. So it's good to get that on record.
Yes, yes, yeah. And thank you for that background because it provides nice context to what we're going to be talking about, which is really this course, right? The Biochem 210 Science Communication that you've been teaching at UCSF. So take us back a little bit. How did this course come about?
Yeah. So again, I've always really liked teaching. Even when I was in graduate school and it was teaching things like genetics or cell biology, being a TA. So I've always really enjoyed that aspect of any kind of work. And I've also really been passionate about mentoring early career scientists because I think that, not only because I was an early career scientist interested in science education and science communication, but I also have seen over the decades doing this work that it's really important to empower early career scientists, not just to, go into a career like documentary film or museums. I feel like all of us have really noticed, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, that having scientists feel they have the skills, abilities, and passions to communicate or engage with the public in whatever way is comfortable for them is really critical. So I felt really inspired to want to teach this class to give students, not just like, you don't like working at the bench, here are all these career options. Obviously, this course I'm going to describe would be useful for that. But really, it's more about helping students understand, get basic skills and understanding of what the many fields related to science communication and education are. And in some ways help them find their voice or their identity around how they might engage with the public, no matter what path they take. And I'd say in large part, the genesis of the class, because I was really interested in mentoring early career scientists, I was part of a grant, one of the PIs on the Center for Cellular Construction based at UC San Francisco, which is an NSF Science and Technology Center. And as part of the Center for Cellular Construction, I'd started an intern program. So it was for students in the center coming to work in the museum where I worked at the time. And it was a very intensive, great internship experience, but it was 3 months, a lot of one-on-one, and there was high demand for that internship. So when the pandemic started, I worked with the center director, Wallace Marshall, and managing director, Deborah Singer, and said, okay, well, if we have to do everything by Zoom, why don't we expand how many people can have access to learning science communication? And we started this, what is a mini course. I think this will be the 4th year teaching it because it was, really popular. So we just kept going with it.
I see. And you mentioned a key word there. So it's a mini course because
Yes.
I was just talking with Daniel Pomeroy at Harvard, and they have nano courses, right? And so there's a theme here. So in a sense, in the syllabi, right, I'm looking at this, it is jam-packed, right? In a short,
Yeah.
I think a week or two, 10 or so days, you're able to jam-pack it all. Tell us, how are you able to fit this thing into an existing sort of busy schedule? For these are graduate students, by the way, right? These are graduate students?
Yes. So UC San Francisco is a biomedical sciences. I mean, there's both basic research, nursing, physicians, but there are no undergraduates. It's only graduate level and professional training. And the idea behind these mini courses, so then I'll get into my specific class, but I think starting, I don't know, 10 years ago, they made it in the curriculum for first year students, in addition to sort of the fundamental courses like genetics or cell biology or biochemistry. They made it that during the spring quarter, there was an opportunity where students could take 2 different, what they call mini courses, which are intensives in sort of a specialized area. So the professors can choose what they want to teach. Maybe it's like the history of the cytoskeleton or bioinformatics, or there's a huge range, but it's an opportunity for students to really dive in and get some experience, training, or exposure to a much more specialized area. So I was already really familiar. I went to UCSF. I've collaborated a lot with faculty there. And so again, when the pandemic started and we couldn't do the in-person internships, I knew that the mini course might be an option because there's a lot of flexibility in the curriculum at that time. So a mini course, it's 20 hours of class time and then about 20 hours outside of class. So the students, of course, they're still doing their lab work, they're doing their rotations, but it is, they do have the bandwidth because they're first year students and they're doing their coursework. It is supposed to be a fairly intensive course. So we usually do it, some years it's a 2-week class, sometimes it's 3, but it's always 20 hours of in-class time. And, I aim for roughly like 20 hours outside of class on the curriculum that I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah. And so what are the students in your mind? Let me rephrase this question. What are the key things that you want students to leave knowing, right, after taking this course? Because one of your course goals, is to develop, and you mentioned this, to develop students' own science communication goals and practices through practical exercises and tools. So take us through, like, what are the core things that you're teaching students in this course?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think that's again why it's good starting, from me having been and working daily as a practitioner. And I'd sort of get out of the way that I think, when you and I first met, we talked about how terminology is even a little confusing, right? Science communication, I picked the title for the course. I said science communication because that's something that anybody on the street, you're like, oh, it's about science and it's being communicated. So it's very easy for anyone to understand the general domain. But those of us who are working in these fields, right? There's science communication, which is usually like, journalism, media, film. There's also informal science learning, which is, much more like museums or after school programs, participatory things. Now we've got the term civic science. Now we've got the term public engagement. It's like, in some ways we touch on all of that in the course, but it's under the blanket. So let's get out of the way. I'm going to use science communication as a placeholder for anything related to public engagement, civic science, informal science learning. That's some of what comes out of this class. So what we do and what I really want the students to leave with is, of course, there is the kind of getting what I would call the fundamentals. Who is your audience? Understanding your audience, setting your goals, knowing what mediums are available to you, not using jargon. So these are things that are very useful. I mean, if you think of it from a lab perspective, it's sort of like learning how to pipette or learning how to design an experiment. But the reality is that those skills are really important and they can serve students. And we do have, we do things around kind of, we use well-vetted science communication toolkits. We go over the, I would say this is like a great resource, the inclusive science communication toolkit. So we do go over a lot of really important fundamental concepts. But what's most important to me in the class is I kind of think of it as analogous to being a scientist. Again, these are scientists. Who is my audience? My audience are early career scientists. How many people get inspired to go into science because they are great at pipetting or they know how to use, a flow cytometer? It's like you need these tools, but often those tools are not the things that really inspire us to do the work. We're inspired to do the work because we have questions, we're curious, or because we have a sense of wonder. There's, in some ways, the reason people are scientists, there are as many varied reasons for being a scientist as there are for sharing our science or engaging with the public. So how that translates into actual course design is, we go over a lot of the fundamentals, like understanding audience, all the things I mentioned. But then I'd say there are two other sort of like significant blocks to the class. One is helping the students see that there is actually like a science to science communication. There are whole bodies of research, whether it's in science communication, psychology, cognitive science, computer science, learning research. There are all kinds of fields that are actually studying how to do this well. And so we read a lot of fundamental papers in, whether it's like motivated numeracy, which means, that people can't process numbers if it relates to like biases they might have. We read a lot of papers from a lot of scholars who work in this area or evaluations. And some of this is so that they appreciate, again, a great museum exhibition or documentary film is not based on, well, we follow these rules of evidence. It's like there is an art to these things, but I think some of this is helping the students understand that there are fields where we can learn what is effective or not. And in some ways, this isn't just so that they understand science communication or science education is evidence-based. To me, that's actually something that's really inspired my work because it inspires curiosity. If you're a scientist, curiosity is one of your most fundamental attributes. And it's, I think in some ways, like showing them that you can even have questions about how to do your work well is inspiring. Did this exhibit, doing it this way or that way, which thing worked better? Oh, if I apply what they know about data design from cognitive science, did my graphic turn out better? I think it's not just showing it that it's like, it's not just random what works in science communication, showing them that it's an evidence-based field can inspire their curiosity and actually, so I feel like that taps into things. So there's that aspect. And then probably the thing that I think is, so, we do the fundamental tools, we do a lot of reading and guest lectures from people across, again, these many domains. We have guest lectures from psychology, communication, there are a lot of people, computer scientists who develop software to use AI to screen for scientific misinformation. So we show how all these different fields influence aspects of public engagement. And then I think the part that is really fun for me, and frankly, probably the most fun for the students, is also just almost a tour of all the ways that you can engage the public. So even from the first day, we do this brainstorm where we try to think of all the ways the public could possibly be exposed to science. And I think there are those usual things like, oh, the New York, articles in a newspaper, so a YouTube video. But then the students really get going on like, oh, what if you see a t-shirt that says, I love meiosis? What if you saw like a road sign that says mask up? What if their ideas, what is talking to your uncle about vaccines at Thanksgiving? Is that science communication? So we really start pushing on what are all the different ways that you can actually do science communication. And through the course, after we do the fundamentals and a lot of things around like the evidence, research on effective communication tools, we then spend a lot of time almost what I would call like a tour. We'll have some different, like we have guest lectures and field trips to, like we went to KQED, our local PBS affiliate where we saw them filming a short series they do online called Deep Look, where they did research on how thumbnails influence gender, which genders watch films. We go to museums and we get tours of how exhibits are designed and how they design programs. We get lectures from people who do social media on all the different social media platforms and which strategies work best. We learn how to do effective dialogue one-on-one with family members. So it's really about then showing them and giving them some idea of like what is required in all these different modes of engagement, so that when they leave the class, they have a better sense. I encourage them to reflect on sort of what resonated for them and what's realistic. It's like a documentary film costs millions of dollars. You are probably not going to leave graduate school and just make a documentary film, but maybe you're like, that's what I want to do. And then someone like me can help them figure out how to get there, or they might be able to have a more constructive conversation with a friend from high school about vaccines. I think it's about really giving them a sense through this course of, not only what the complex, interesting landscape of science communication is, but also a sense of what might resonate for them. Because again, I think kind of getting back to science, some people in science are like great tool builders. Some people, are connectors and collaborators. Some of this is getting the students to sort of see that whatever their skills and talents and personalities are, there's a place for them to engage the public. But I'm sure you have questions.
Actually,
passionate, as you can see.
No, this rarely happens. You were answering my questions as I was thinking about them. So I think it was natural to just let you continue and answer them.
I'm not being one of the most important things from either inclusive science communication or communication is also being a good listener. So I would like to listen to your questions.
And I think you were leading up to this when students are leaving your course, because they're going through a lot in this short time span. There's theory. It's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing theory. Wow. I'm hearing practice.
Yes.
Right? And so what are they telling you after this course? What are you tracking directly and indirectly?
That's a great question. And, again, when I'm a huge fan of evaluation and research. I'm sure you can sense, since I spend a lot of time teaching, learning science papers, showing them. We actually cover how to evaluate and assess your own programs. I go through a whole section on how can you get feedback, whether it's just anecdotal from the audience or surveys, or full on hiring a learning scientist or professional evaluator. So I take feedback. How do I assess it? I do take that stuff really seriously. And I think there have been a few ways. The most concrete is we do anonymous course evaluation, where, there's a series of maybe 10 questions. So every year we've done that. I'll start with that. It's been literally the first time I read the course evaluations, I cried, but it was not tears of sadness. I was so touched. And I don't know if some of it was that first course was taught during the kind of the height of the pandemic. Vaccines were not even out yet. There was all of the intensity around COVID. And some of the students, multiple students self-reported, again, it was anonymous, that the class changed how they perceived themselves and their role in their community and how they should share science. It was just really touching because it felt like for some of the students, it was incredibly personal. And I saw that also in their capstone project is proposing anything they want to do. It can be pie in the sky, really small. So the evaluations, I feel like for some of the students, it's like profound how much it shifts their identity around, instead of keeping science in a little box, like I go to lab and I'm a scientist and I do this. It's like, I can see for some of the students that it really expands how they see their role as a scientist in their families and their communities. And so that's feedback I've definitely gotten every year. I don't always cry. Maybe it was like a day where I was particularly susceptible to tears. But the other thing that has come through loud and clear, and then I'll talk about how we're going to do a more formal assessment, is that multiple students say they think the course should be required. that it has absolutely helped them. And that's why, that they know how to do better communication. They know how to be clearer. And many of the evaluations say, this is, one of the most important classes I've taken. I wish this class should be required for every student. So the evaluations have been like amazing. I mean, I'm happy to share them with, well, I don't know if I'm happy to share them. I don't know what the IRB is around but we do that. And then what I'm also doing is, again, because this course has been supported by this, the Center for Cellular Construction and a grant from NSF, we are going to be doing a longitudinal survey. So I'm working with, a PhD trained social scientist. I'm a cell biologist. I know how to run a column and how to use a microscope. I'm working with a social scientist who's going to be not only coding and looking at the evaluations, but also doing a longitudinal survey to look at some facets of like, okay, I had the stated course goals. These students longitudinally, how has it impacted these different areas? Like, how has it impacted their affect around science communication? How has it influenced their identity, in addition to just fundamental skills and content knowledge? So we're working on that now, and then hope to publish that this year.
I think that's fantastic. And I think evaluation is important because we know that it can be challenging to do, right? And so
money. You're going to do it well. Again, you can do course evaluation, and I'm not saying you always, I really value, and maybe this comes through in the class, and this is something I want to communicate to my students, valuing the expertise of others, right? I know, okay, I'm great at designing exhibits, exhibitions, programming for the public. I know what I'm good. I know how to do cell biology, or at least I used to. I know that I am not someone who knows how to design an unbiased survey. I know I don't know about inter-rater reliability. So depending on where you might want to publish or share these results, you may need to collaborate with or hire an evaluator. Again, any evaluation is better than no evaluation, but I would at the very least, suggest that people consult with an evaluator or someone who's experienced in rigorous course evaluation. But it does take funding. I mean, in this case, because it is part of an NSF grant, the course directors have been really, or the center directors have been really supportive of having evaluation and supporting the analysis.
Yeah, because I think and thank you for sharing that advice. For those who may be watching this that are trying to design courses like this, right? Having that even from the get-go, right? The evaluation in mind. What is it that you're trying to do, right? And in your syllabi, you have actually 2 course goals, right? The second one I didn't say is to provide an understanding of what science communication is, why it is needed, and what strategies are effective across audiences through readings and discussion, right? And so I do want to push you a little bit on the evaluation. Is there a metric, a quantitative metric that keeps you up at night from this course?
Quantitative, no. I mean, I've actually, and I have quite a bit, again, I'm not a social scientist. In my experience, I have been on a lot of R&D projects. I mean, I've led several NSF funded projects in informal learning where it's like, there's the R and the D. I'm the D, right? I'm a program designer. Even designing this class, you're understanding your audience, you're setting goals and objectives, and then it's very difficult. In my experience, having worked, again, designing like museum exhibitions or data visualizations, most of the evaluations or even research I've seen is very qualitative, right? What number, in some ways, I guess it's like I would push back a little bit. What would be a quantitative, I feel like something this complex and varied where you're looking at, I guess you could make your evaluation a sliding scale 1 through 5, but then I feel like you're not going to capture the richness of like, how did this shift someone's identity? How do they see themselves as a science communicator going forward? So maybe you could make it quantitative, but then I'm not sure what I would want to know that would have a quantitative answer. But I mean, that's a good, I'm glad can you think of an example of a quantitative thing that would you get out of a class like this?
Yeah. In a way, in the sense that the courses out there, it all goes back to your objective, right? Your course goals. I think
Exactly.
ultimately, whether they're qualitative or quantitative is probably not as important as what are your course goals, and is qualitative answer sufficient for you to know, so that it allows you to adjust what you're
Right.
trying to do with the course, right? So whether, in terms of audience identification or something, maybe doing a test of some kind to tell you, okay, they don't know how to do X in this way, and then afterwards they feel more confident that they're able to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I don't know, right? It depends on the course goals.
No, and I think that's good. It's good to like this is why I like feedback. This is gonna be our one-on-one evaluation. No, I mean, I think given this is something that is also important to point out. This course is really small. It's many students want to take it, but one of the things about the mini course is it is not supposed to be a lecture. It's supposed to be graduate form. It's supposed to be skills based, and a lot of reading and discussion and a lot of critiques of individual projects. So I think that also supports more qualitative methods, like, and knowing the students and kind of getting a sense of what they're interested in and what they're learning. But I agree that, maybe there could be some pre and post. I can work with the social scientist I'm collaborating with, and maybe they can help me for this year's class.
There's so much in here for sure. So you mentioned the students are telling you that they wish that this was part of their required curriculum.
Yes. Well, yes, the students have definitely every year, at least out of the 12 students in the course, I'd say at least 4 or 5 say they wish that it was required.
I see. Can you expand a little bit on that? Like, what else are they saying? Do they want a suite? Because they take this course, and can they take others? And I know there's another science policy course at UCSF, right?
There is. So the two things that I'm aware of. So again, UCSF is a health sciences, graduate and professional school. There is no journalism department. There's no communications department. There's no, there are communications experts in health risk communication. But it's not like Berkeley or Stanford or Harvard, where there's like all these different departments where you could draw in faculty. So there are very, very limited actual courses. There might be trainings offered here and there, but my course is the only course in science communication. Keith Yamamoto, who many people listening may know, who's the current president of AAAS, he and Ben Rubin, also on the faculty at UCSF, teach a science policy course, a mini course. They teach a science policy mini course. I teach science communication, and we collaborate a lot and make sure we're covering different things. I guest lecture in their course. And the Science and Education Health Partnership, led by Catherine Nielsen and with some stewardship from Bruce Alberts, who was the former president of the National Academy of Sciences, there is likely going to be a science education mini course, which again, we're all kind of communicating and working together on, could there be this suite? Could we eventually work toward a certificate program in one or more of these? Each is their own expertise: science education, science policy, informal science education and communication. They all are their own fields. But they're fairly limited offerings, I think, because UCSF is again focused on like biomedical health sciences training.
Yeah. So I suspect maybe there'll be others in development in the future, right? As students are asking different things, because in your syllabi, and for those who are watching this, they go through a lot in here, right? You've got communicating science online. You've got setting communication goals, right? We know, of course, you had John Beasley, of course, right? Who came by, engaging with the public in museums, visual science communication. Jen, now rapid answers, right? We had that phase. I wish I could I think we need to have you back. That's for sure. Okay. So, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions here.
Yes.
Favorite topic in your syllabi? What do you love teaching students to do?
Having spent almost 20 years working in science museums, definitely the science museum, designing experiences for science museums that are evidence-based and creative. That's definitely my favorite, of course.
Memorable event in the time span you've taught this course. Is there a moment in time where something happened? I know you mentioned you read the evaluations at one point. Give us another.
the first year that we did, again, these capstone projects, so there's, the intensive mini course, and then for the final project, again, to let the students feel liberated and sort of find their voice in this, they can propose anything they wanna do. Like, what would you do if you could do anything? And it could be like, I'm gonna make the whole United States have a science day where
Mm.
it can be anything, a huge dream or something as small as like, I'm gonna practice how I'm gonna talk to my grandma about vaccines. The first time the students presented so it was probably because it was the first time I taught the class. I'd thought about it a lot, done all the work of teaching it, and then in their final presentations, one of the students had made a brochure for how to explain COVID vaccines in Spanish. It was reflecting her identity, where she came from, and then she made the pamphlet and went to Target, which is a large chain store here in California, probably other places as well, and was planning on sharing it, taking it to sit with her mom, who worked at Target, in the break room, hand out the pamphlet and answer questions in Spanish. I could practically tear up. And another student who was from Wisconsin talked about how she was going to go to rural areas where she was from, and this was her idea, have science fairs showing them that agriculture was actually science related. And there were several other examples. So that first time of seeing, how these students had really incorporated that where they come from and who they are and their interests is such an asset, whether they ever did these things or not, for them to see that, their language abilities or where they grew up or who their friends were, those are things, if we choose to, we can leverage. It was really profound for me, because I think I felt like maybe they would have thought these things anyway, maybe, and I shouldn't attribute them to myself, but I was blown away.
Yeah, yeah. And the majority of students taking this course are first year. Is that right? You mentioned that earlier.
Yes. Sometimes, so they get priority because it is within a program at UCSF. I can't even say what the acronym. There is a program called Tetrad that does a lot of the training for the kind of core biomedical research students. They get priority, and then if there's space left, students students who are further along in their training can take it.
I see. Okay, 30 or so seconds. You have the magic wand, Jen. Okay, all right. What would you want to do at this juncture with the course more broadly? Give us a sense. Anchor it with the course, especially.
Well, I love. This has probably come across. I really love teaching the course. If I had all the time in the world, the magic wand would be, I love being a practitioner and actually doing the work of creating public engagement.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a magic wand with the course as a basis, I would offer the course much more throughout the year. I would have versions of the course I could give in other places, which, I can do. I would have seminars where I invite in people to give talks. I think I would just expand the opportunities for any scientist to learn these kinds of things in ways that work with their very busy schedules. Seminars, online learning. And I would probably also make it that in some ways, not that it's required, but that there is a reward system, because I still feel like these are students who are choosing to do this and self-sorting, and I feel like these skills could benefit anyone, and I wish that there was more motivation by all scientists to infuse their work with a bit of this.
Yeah, and you would encourage students to partake, right, in these type of courses, right, during their graduate training, right? At least, is that right?
Again, I do think it would be useful. Magic wand, I wish that, I would like to just do more of this for the people who want it. I don't necessarily want to force science communication training on people, because if someone is not receptive, again, if we look at all the evidence, all these books, having read, all the research, if someone is not receptive to the message and does not want to learn it, it is not usually effective. So I don't necessarily, but I do think something that was about policy, education, and communication, I think it would be nice if even a school like UCSF that's very research focused, if they did have one introductory course on the interface of science and society, ethics, policy, education, and communication, I think that would be tremendous, and it would give students a sense of the importance of their role in society and ways they might engage that suit their personalities, which is not just science communication, but these other areas as well. That's probably what I would push for the most, is one required course that touches on the interface of science and society and includes science communication and beyond.
I can imagine ending this in any other way, Jen. That was
Ending
a wonderful place. Ending this conversation in that manner. Thank you for sharing. No, I think we need to have you back.
Oh, wow. I don't know. Well, given how long my answers were, see, I'm already self-evaluating. That's one of the things I teach a student. I'm like, some of these answers were way too long, but I get very excited.
I mean, these are in-depth conversations, right?
Yes.
And from this, there will be, I think there's so much in here, right? It's like a tree, many roots, many pathways for people to engage. I think we've covered so much ground that I think we need to have you back and dig in one of these things, right? For example, sharing curriculum, we didn't really get into that so much. And, where the students are after they graduate, because if they take the course and it's like 5 years later, by the time they're done, what happens to them, right? How does this course impact them? I think there's so much, and I know you're thinking about all of this.
Well, maybe when the evaluation, again, I feel like very privileged that, and very grateful to the Center for Cellular Construction that they're supporting. We are going to be doing, hopefully, a longitudinal analysis of where the students are. Most of them would only be fourth years at this point, the starting cohort, but maybe I will definitely keep you posted, and maybe that would be a good time to come back. Or we could have a whole session on data visualization, or the Kool-Aid guy crashing through the wall. No, that's a joke.
Jen
Thanks
Frazier,
for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll be looking forward for the next time.
All right, and anybody out there, there are many Jennifer Fraziers in the world, but you can find me if you have questions. I always welcome anyone reaching out, and I'm happy to share resources, experience, and anything else.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much.